needed to leave. Rashid was bummed he didn't even finish his tea, but Sol pointed out he'd emptied the cup, looking surprised. Then the prince handed his sister a document, and she asked how she should pay him, but he insisted the cup of tea was enough. Afterwards, His Majesty thanked the maid for brewing the delicious tea, and she, in turn, thanked him. That's when Eris told her brother to back off someone else's maid and demanded he get lost. The prince finally admitted he'd try to be less pushy, and after he left, Siana realized just how close the sisters were. But the little princess shot back, saying their relationship was actually awful. The maid also noticed the princess had a good talk with her brother after getting that document, but she claimed it was just a small deal. The girl also explained that even though her brother agreed, he put her in major debt since they're competing for the throne. Siana had previously thought the crown prince was the sole heir to the empire, but a lot had changed. This also meant the power struggle between brother and sister was still on. Eris was feeling pretty good right now, even though she has no family or mother to support her. The girl also confessed she didn't want this fate for herself, but at the same time, she's glad she can take on this challenge from destiny. Now Siana understood she was wrong when she initially thought the brother and sister got along well. If they actually cared about each other, she wouldn't treat the princess's feelings like they're nothing. Siana knew being a princess sucks in every royal family, and you gotta ditch your childhood to be throne-worthy. She wondered how she could handle that weight all alone, and then Eris asked if she wanted more tea. The maid was also thinking back to when all she wanted was a simple life in this crazy world. Meanwhile, Sol was grilling the prince about whether he was into Siana, and he said her big eyes made her look like a squirrel. Then His Majesty started thinking about snatching the maid for himself, and asked if the guard had noticed any changes around the palace. He admitted it was noticeably cleaner, and he'd seen Princess Eris looking way better than before, too. They both agreed the maid was doing a good job, and then the prince shoved Sol, 'cause he was being a drag. Rashid also said he was stoked Aris finally opened up to Siana, and that she doesn't judge people based on their title or power. He also pointed out the maid's down-to-earth and good at connecting with people, even though that's not enough to earn real trust. Then His Majesty remembered how his sister, when she was still in the womb, was just as restless. Rosemary even let him touch her stomach, and he could see for himself how much that kid kicked. Rashid then added that everything that was cute stayed in Aris, while admitting that he liked the tea Siana brewed. Meanwhile, the maid asked the princess if His Majesty would be visiting them often now, but she didn't know. After a while, Siana ran into Choo-Choo near the warehouse, and the girls were really happy to see each other. Strong Girl noticed that her friend had gotten a little pale, and she in turn noticed that Choo-Choo had gotten bigger. She confessed that she was training a lot now to bulk up her body, and then asked how Siana was doing. The girl adjusted the gifted hairpin, which she had again, and told her a little about herself. Recently, the emperor visited her and Eris again, deciding to just drop by on his way. He also brought them a cake with lots of filling and chocolate, declaring that it was for the princess. After that, he asked Siana to take care of him today, and the girl couldn't disobey his order. While she was brewing some delicious tea, Aris decided to wait so she could have the cake with it. When everything was ready, the princess noticed the dessert was super tasty, and she thanked her brother. Then the little kid declared that it was unfair to pay for her testimony with just 2 cups of tea. So, she asked her brother to grant her another request, explaining that she'd recently dropped a maid's hairpin in the water. His Majesty understood what his sister wanted and promised he'd do it for her, and Siana, overhearing, was actually a little surprised. Soon, the servants drained the fountain so the bottom was visible, and then they started looking for the lost item. Choo-Choo couldn't believe that 100 soldiers were working on this, but Siana assured her that was exactly what was happening. And even before that, the maid had received another confirmation from the prince because she needed to sew some new clothes for Aris. She needed high-quality fabrics for this, and when the storekeeper saw the prince's seal on the letter, he was totally shocked. So, she pulled it off, because she knew maids needed serious endurance, and she buckled down and got it done. That night, when Siana was hauling the fabrics back, she thought someone was pushing from behind, giving her a hand. But when she turned around, she saw Emperor Rashid standing there with a genuine smile on his face. She immediately apologized and greeted him, not realizing it was him, and he asked why there were so many things on the cart. His Majesty then asked the maid to look up and explained he just wanted to help, but she didn't understand why. Rashid then explained again that she was so small and the cart was so big, so he just figured he'd lend a hand. After telling her friend all this, Siana decided to say goodbye, worried the princess would start looking for her. But then Choo Choo confessed her suspicions that the crown prince has some kind of mental issues and is definitely nuts. She added that a low-ranking maid's life is worse than a fly's, and no matter what, they're just slave labor. Choo Choo also admitted she's worried, because Rashid might lose it around Siana, and she should get a job at the Ruby Palace too. But the ex-princess figured, talented as her friend was, there was no way they'd send her there, even if she could become an official maid. As the girls were saying goodbye, Eris walked up and was like, "What's taking Siana so long?" "I'm starving." The maid reported that she'd made the princess a snack before leaving, and Eris explained she'd already inhaled those 10 cookies. Then the little brat grabbed the maid's hand and begged her to come back, 'cause she was seriously hungry. As she left, Aris gave Choo Choo a nasty look, so Siana didn't think they'd send another maid to the Ruby Palace. Back at the palace, the princess guessed that the maid liked this Choo Choo so much because she was big and buff. The girl explained that she was one of the students and added that she liked her because she was super kind and helpful. Siana also confirmed that Choo Choo was seriously strong and could carry multiple sacks on just one arm. After that, the princess asked the maid to make meat and milk today, declaring that she wasn't a kid anymore and it was time to change her diet. The girl remarked that the little brat was kinda cute when she was mad, but then she heard a familiar voice behind her again. The emperor and his lackey strolled up, and the princess immediately wanted to know what brought him back again. Rashid said he just wanted to check on them, but she shot back that after 5 visits, he should know the drill. Then he held out a dessert and explained it was a sponge cake topped with whipped cream made from the best white milk. Plus, the cake's decorated with fresh fruit, and the prince also brought tea again. Eris had a sweet tooth, and figured since he brought cake, he could stick around this time. Rashid told Siana to be careful, but all she could think was how suspiciously friendly he was acting. Still, she invited them inside, all the while thinking the emperor had officially lost his mind. As he entered the building, the guard glanced back, like he spotted something, but didn't see the cloaked figure ducking around the corner. It was his sister, who decided to tail him, and now saw her brother was heading to the Ruby Palace again. Then she went to the 5th princess, Yvette, and reported that the prince brought a ton of sweets for Princess Eris this time. She was just pissed that His Majesty kept coming to this place, and it really got under her skin. With her was Leovisuane Diaro, the emperor's 5th wife, who thought the little girl was just a poor kid. But Yvette was still ticked off because she outranked her and didn't get why she wasn't worthy of all this. The princess didn't get why Rashid was being so friendly with Aris, 'cause that girl was a total loser. So, she figured that to get her brother's attention, she had to meet this girl in person. Then she wrote her a letter, saying she wanted to meet up and have a heart-to-heart over tea. Eris realized Yvette was planning a sneak attack, and it really bugged her, which she told her maid. Siana thought she was tormenting the little princess, who knew she'd just giggle and trash her outfit when they met. But the girl also understood why, 'cause she didn't know any etiquette and felt like just an empty princess shell. The maid told her not to think like that, saying she was there for her and promised to get Aris ready for the tea party. Siana was about to spill everything to the princess and scrambled to grab some books, but the kid was totally lost. Aris couldn't figure out how a regular maid knew all this stuff, so Siana explained she was the princess's personal maid. Up till now, Siana figured the girl didn't want to learn, but she needed to know at least basic table manners. She needed to, or she wouldn't last a day in the imperial palace. Siana started by saying you can't drink tea until the host takes a sip. Also, you gotta drink tea quietly, and as soon as you take a sip, you set the cup right back on the saucer. And that shouldn't make a sound either. Princess Eris thought it all sounded way too complicated. Still, she gave it a shot, and to her surprise, she nailed it. The maid immediately gave her props. Next, the girl practiced thanking someone for the delicious tea, and she got another compliment from her teacher. Siana was stoked that the girl was paying attention and was doing everything perfectly. She was a fast learner. To pump her up even more, the maid started calling the princess a genius, which she totally loved. Unlike nobles who love sucking up, the royal family has to be arrogant, or they'll get walked all over. Meanwhile, the emperor showed up uninvited and immediately noticed his sister was drinking differently now. His Majesty could see that Eris's manners had changed too. Then he glanced at the maid and knew she was behind it. Siana was hoping the crown prince wouldn't notice anything, and she felt a little uneasy that he actually did. Still, the maid owed the princess, so she was confident she could handle it and prepared for a positive outcome. Soon, the etiquette training was over, and the next day, Siana decided to embellish the little lady's dress. Eris was surprised the maid had sewn the dress herself, and Siana admitted she wanted her to look perfect. The maid hoped the princess liked it and asked how she felt wearing the new outfit. The girl just twirled in front of the maid, asking how she looked, and then, both satisfied, they went to get ready. By this time, Yvette was already waiting for them, thinking her little sister would be wearing rags as usual today. She remembered scolding Aris for eating with her hands, thinking she was just some disgusting commoner. Yvette figured things would be exactly the same, and she could make fun of her sister again, which made her feel good. But little Aris was late, and the fifth princess actually started getting bored waiting, pissed off that she still hadn't shown up. Then she heard a kid's voice behind her, thanking her for inviting her to tea. Turning around, she couldn't believe her eyes. That little dirtbag now looked like a princess. Siana chimed in, saying Aris looked gorgeous, like a fairy from some mythical fairy tale. She was just basking in her own beauty, convinced she was beautiful because she looked like her mom. The maid repeated that she would be the most charming at the tea party and could win the battle by capturing everyone's attention. Seeing her sister's stunned expression, Aris asked what was wrong, smiling sweetly, like she was trying to annoy Yvette. The girl remembered the maid's advice. Keep smiling, because a smile always wins at the door. Eris also noticed her sister had gone completely pale, but she just said she was happy to see her after so long. Yvette even found it funny watching this little kid try to play princess, but she invited her to the table anyway. The fifth princess admitted she had a lot of news, and also remarked that her sister actually looked like a human being now. At the same time, she was mentally trying to figure out what happened to the monster she'd seen last time. Then she saw how meticulously the maid was taking care of the girl, and decided all these changes were because of her. But to her sister, Yvette declared she was glad she'd finally grown up, and then dismissively gave an order. She pointed out that her cup was empty and demanded it be filled again, and the maid came over to pour more tea. But Yvette protested, explaining that it shouldn't be the servant pouring, but her sister herself. The girl remembered that even though she'd studied etiquette, she hadn't had any lessons on serving tea yet. Aris realized her sister was trying her hardest to find fault with her, but she picked up the teapot anyway. The little princess knew if things kept going this way, she'd have no choice but to take matters into her own hands. So, she knocked her teacup over, splashing Yvette, who jumped up totally shocked. Eris just gave a polite apology, saying her hand suddenly spazzed out. But Yvette started yelling that she'd hurt her. Now, playing the big sister, Yvette geared up to punish the little brat and raised her hand to strike. But the maid stopped her, looming over her like a storm cloud, telling her to cut it out, while Aris just watched from behind her. The fifth princess was floored by the maid's actions, who then begged her to forgive her sister, saying she saw her set her up. Siana also added that no one can punish royalty without His Majesty's direct order. It's the law. Yvette was pissed that even though she outranked her, the maid was trying to lecture her on family rules. It was just a formality, and nobody really followed them, so the weak were supposed to be trampled without a second thought. Yvette knew damn well nobody cared about those rules, and now some maid was trying to call her out on it. Still, she admitted the girl was sharp, so even though her sister learned manners, they really had the maid to thank. Then she got in Siana's face, asking how she dared touch royalty, and declared she deserved punishment. Right then, her own maid showed up and started yelling that this maid was trying to humiliate a member of the royal family. Then she shoved Siana to the floor, and all Siana did was thank her for teaching her the rules. Stunned, Eris didn't know what to say, especially since she was just a kid. But they decided to get out of there. As they left, the fifth princess yelled that she hoped to see them again, and told her sister to just shut up. Once Siana and the little one were in the carriage, Eris asked why the maid did that, but Siana didn't know what she meant. The little princess understood that the maid had suffered because of her, taking the whole hit. But this woman defended her, and then Aris suggested they clean up the wound first. When they got to the palace, Eris started dabbing at the scratch with a wet cotton pad, and Siana realized the princess had never done this before. The little girl got flustered, but Siana reassured her it was okay and decided to teach the kid how to treat wounds properly. Siana explained that first, you gotta disinfect the cotton swab and then dab it on the wound. Just then, she noticed the princess was starting to cry and figured she was just mad about what happened today. Eris admitted she was a little, but Siana explained that Eris was just as much a princess as Yvette, so she didn't need to be scared. The maid then added that anything goes and asked if the little one wanted to punish her older sister. Eris was totally down, but she was worried about her maid, and Siana told her not to sweat it. Siana promised she'd teach her everything, show her exactly how to do it, 'cause she knows the princess real well by now. Then she asked the little girl why it happened, and Eris guessed it was 'cause she's younger than Yvette. The girl couldn't even believe it was all because of age and that she had such a low title, so Siana asked how you even determine a title. Eris explained that it's the difference between having something or not, and Yvette's got power, wealth, and support, unlike her. So, the maid asked her again, making sure the kid understood exactly why this happened. Aris realized the maid had a mom, and then Siana added she needed to win over adults to get stronger. The maid explained that it was the fastest, most realistic way for the princess to influence the royal family. The maid also promised to always have her back, but she needed to find someone with major power first. The girl didn't know how to find him, but Siana said there was one way, and he'd probably side with her. Meanwhile, a guard reported to the emperor that the maid had been sneaking around. People saw her leaving in a carriage. Sol also guessed she went to see Princess Yvette, which made Rashid furious that he hadn't been told about this before. The guard stopped him, explaining what could happen if he interfered in the rivalry between the two princesses. He added that Siana could get hurt too, and Eris is her boss, plus she's a contender for the throne. Sol also added the crown prince is a strong candidate, so the princesses probably won't even bother competing. He even said his own mom would want it. But the guy shot back that Sol was a good friend, but he wasn't gonna listen to that crap. The guard then apologized to His Majesty for what he said, while Rashid was thinking that Siana genuinely cared about Aris regardless. He was still bugged about why he cared so much. Then he remembered that even back when he was a teen, he was already a top contender for the throne. No matter how much people supported him, there was one person in the empire who was way stronger. That was Empress Goldria, and because of that woman, his power was basically meaningless. Meanwhile, Siana was also explaining to the princess that the strongest person around was Empress Goldria. She was the one the girl needed to get on her side. But the princess had no idea how to do that. She figured the empress wouldn't want to meet, but Siana explained they'd create a situation where Goldria would want to meet. The woman revealed that the empress had another daughter, but she died from poisoning before she even turned 10. That same poison was used on the current emperor, and the story is the young princess accidentally swallowed it and died. And instead of mourning her dead daughter, Her Majesty decided to cover the whole thing up. Of course, she punished those who tried to kill her daughter and son, and used it as an excuse to take out her political enemies. In the end, she strengthened the prince's allies and made him the current emperor. But that wasn't all. Siana suggested that even though Goldria seems like a heartless person, every mom's heart aches for her daughter. That woman distanced herself from her own son because of it, and then, over time, completely withdrew into herself. The girl could already picture the old empress being delivered the news about the little princess. And even though Eris was still sure it was hopeless, Siana kept assuring her that this was a golden opportunity for them. Then she asked the little girl to write a letter, saying how much she missed her mother. Soon this letter was delivered to Her Majesty Goldria. But when she read it, she immediately tore it in half. But they didn't give up at the Ruby Palace, and soon Aris sent the Empress another letter. Goldria didn't even bother reading them, just ordered them tossed right away. She did the same with the next few. The kid kept writing, knowing she was getting rejected every time, but she never stopped hoping to meet her. Finally, the Empress decided to actually read one of the little princess's letters. Following Siana's plan, the letter even had a peach scent, which was a little childish. Siana knew Goldria was old school, so it'd be better to use more elegant language. But she asked Aris to write to the Empress like a granddaughter, who thought she was like a spring flower. The girl was still young, and she didn't get how old people could like that kind of stuff. Siana just asked for patience, and soon they got a reply in the style of the great poet the Empress favored. The maid was overjoyed that all their hard work on the letters hadn't been for nothing and had finally paid off. Eris just told the maid to keep it down and asked how long they had to keep writing these dumb letters. The girl told the princess not to worry, totally confident the Empress would summon her any minute now. She also noticed she wrote like Ruby Palace, while Goldria asked the maid what this princess even looked like. Siana, the maid, was still waiting for an answer when Eris hurried down from upstairs in her new dress. Next thing you know, the girl tripped and tumbled down the stairs, sprawled out at the bottom, and Siana freaked out. The maid didn't get why she was in such a rush, but the princess just held out an envelope to her. The servant wasn't sure what the letter was about, and then Aris explained her grandma had invited her to the palace. Soon they were ready and arrived to meet the Empress, where the princess politely thanked her for the invitation. Goldria greeted her granddaughter in a kinda dry voice, but it was obvious she wasn't happy to see her. Then the girl went up to her and explained that she'd prepared a small gift as a token of her gratitude. Pulling out a small bottle, the princess explained they were tea leaves made from acacia blossoms. Eris heard the Empress loved floral teas, so she brewed one up special just for her. Then, the little tyke humbly asked her grandma to accept the gift, if she was cool with it. Goldria noticed the girl really did have the look, and she saw those violet eyes, just like His Highness. Even though Aris was the youngest of the whole family, those eyes screamed royal blood. Then the Empress admitted it was a one-of-a-kind gift and invited her granddaughter to have a cup with her. Soon, as they were sitting at the table, Her Majesty remarked that the tea was seriously delicious. The princess thanked her, super happy her grandma liked it, and then they kept chatting. Just like in the letters they'd been sending, Aris didn't complain about her life and praised the Empress. Their conversations were kinda pointless, but the sight of the two of them was pretty damn extravagant. They both silently set down their cups, stirring their tea with a spoon and holding back smiles while they drank. Aristia nailed court etiquette. Flawless, no complaints. She even covered her mouth sometimes when she talked. The kid was reciting poems in this delicate voice, posture perfect, everything learned just for today. Aristia also mentioned how pretty the garden flowers were, and Goldria decided she could have any she wanted. That totally made the princess's day, and she thanked Her Majesty again, flashing this adorable smile. The Empress thought to herself what a beautiful child she was, then announced it was getting late and dismissed her. The princess looked all flustered and started apologizing for taking up so much of Her Majesty's time. Then the little one thanked her one last time and headed back to her palace, hoping everything went okay. That reminded Goldria of how her own daughter used to apologize for bothering her and then leave. Her imperial kid always gave her this sweet, genuine smile, and she'd never forget it. It also just crushed Her Majesty that her girl died so young, and it's haunted her all these years. And then she looked closer at little Eris again, and was even more convinced she looked just like her. Back at the palace, Siana noticed the princess seemed lost in thought, so she asked her what was up. Eris explained that she used to think the Empress was someone without tears or blood, but now she saw that wasn't true. The maid then noticed that the princess's personality had changed a lot, and she was playing such a cute kid that it was hard not to smile. Still, there was one problem: the guilt, and if it hurt Eris this much, it was better not to do it again. Siana asked if the girl felt guilty about deceiving the Countess, and Eris admitted that she didn't feel that way at all. Aris explained that while they were together, the Countess hadn't asked her a single thing about the princess during their whole conversation. After all, a girl who'd lost her mother should be interesting in some way, like her beauty or her knowledge, right? But for Goldria, what mattered way more was how much the little girl looked like her deceased daughter. If that woman knew the real her, there's no way she'd be smiling so sweetly at this little girl. So, yeah, the princess basically feels like telling her grandma to go to hell. It even pissed her off a little, but after she calmed down, she asked the maid how well she'd done today. Siana admitted that the little one had done great, that she was proud of her, and Aris, hearing that praise, threw her arms around the maid. The maid, meanwhile, realized that instead of finding support for the princess, she was making her lose herself. She also thought now that this plan was way too cruel, but she didn't have any other choice. Recently, she bumped into His Majesty again, late at night in the garden, and immediately thanked him for his help. The girl explained that, thanks to him, she was able to get what she wanted, and then she decided to ask him something. Siana wanted to know something about the deceased daughter of the emperor's mother, and he just couldn't refuse her. That's how the girl found out about the countess's daughter from the crown prince, and the empress's memories are tied to what the dead princess looked like. Also, that she really loved the smell of acacia, what color dresses she liked to wear, and what poems she liked to read. This would seriously mess with the Empress's head, and that's all it'd take to trigger a grieving mother. That's how Empress Goldria will fall head over heels for a fake version of her dead daughter. Siana asked the prince how she could repay him for his help, but he said she didn't need to do anything. All he wanted to know was, out of everyone in the palace, why did she pick Empress Goldria? Rashid then clarified it was just a question, and he was genuinely curious, that's all. Siana admitted that back when she was just trying to survive as a powerless princess, this was her plan. She figured she could find some support, so she started digging up dirt on the imperial family. Just like now, she wanted to leverage the empress's grief over her lost daughter. The plans were similar. Thinking about it now, Siana realized she never stood a chance of reaching the empress from that far away, so she wasn't cut out for the job, but thanks to His Majesty's help, she managed to get to the empire. So, Princess Eris managed to pull off that plan instead, and it's all thanks to the emperor. Rashid asked if she blamed him for everything, but she confessed she blamed the family who abused her. But instead of getting depressed, she just kept scheming how to escape, and now she's totally stoked. The emperor thought it was seriously weird that she wasn't blaming her family's killer, but was actually psyched. Plus, he thought her face was kinda cute, but there was also something savage about it. Now Siana knew that if her plan worked, it was time to move on to the next stage. Soon, Yvette got another letter from her little sister and decided the girl had completely lost it. After a while, she visited her, and Eris thanked her for accepting her invitation and being her guest for tea. Yvette was genuinely surprised, 'cause just 3 months ago, this girl looked like a beggar, but now she'd totally changed. Then the fifth princess asked her to pour some tea and explained that this time she wanted the maid to serve her. And Yvette reminded the maid that she'd screwed up last time, asking if she even realized what she'd done wrong. Knowing she was just some low-level maid, she figured it'd be easy to get under her skin. Siana poured the tea perfectly, but then Yvette decided to complain about why she was staring at her. The maid just apologized, but the fifth princess kept insisting she was blatantly glaring at her. Then, Yvette decided the maid was mad at her, but Siana denied it. After that, the princess explained to her little sister that this maid needed to be taught a lesson since she didn't learn it last time. Then she ordered a whip to be brought, but Iris demanded her sister stop, saying she wouldn't forgive her if she touched Siana again. Yvette just got angrier, not understanding why the brat was counting on Granny's help and now dared to act this way towards her. She admitted she knew everything and then decided to share something the little girl didn't know. Yvette asked why Eris thought she could rely on the Empress, even if she was His Majesty's biological mother. She also said that the person the girl was relying on was powerless, since the Emperor hadn't spoken to her in ages. The fifth princess confessed that everyone knew Rashid taking the throne was a done deal, except little Aris. She couldn't wait to see that woman fall, and thought the kid was just dumb for picking someone who was buttering her up. That's when Her Majesty showed up, surprised to hear such filthy words coming from a young lady's mouth. Yvette was completely stunned and lost her voice for a second, not understanding why the Empress was there. Eris immediately ran to her grandma and tried to explain, while the Empress asked what was going on. The little one explained she was having her first tea party and invited her sister, but figured she messed up and admitted she was ashamed now. Then the little princess also pointed out there wasn't an adult in her palace who could teach her things properly. The Empress looked at the girl, realizing she didn't have a mother, and promised she would help her. While Yvette was wondering how Goldria dared show up, she started scolding her for insulting a child. She yelled that the fifth princess was totally looking down on the kid, while treating Eris like some innocent little lamb. Then Her Majesty snatched the whip and laid into that so-called princess's hands. She'd heard Yvette was trying to punish a maid, so she decided to show her how it's done. That's when the fifth princess started claiming she was His Majesty's descendant, so Goldria couldn't touch her without the Emperor's permission. But Her Majesty was like, "How dare this chick threaten me with my own son?" And that just set her off. The Empress told Yvette she could ask anyone what they thought about it, for all she cared. Even if her son disagreed with her decision, he still wouldn't ignore his sister's disgusting behavior. Then she ordered Yvette to hurry up and lift her dress, and she couldn't disobey the command. The next thing she knew, she got a smack on the ankles, which made her lose it and call Goldria a crazy old hag. After that, she got another smack, even more painful, and started screaming that her mom wouldn't let her get away with this. That's when she showed up and immediately wanted to know what the hell was going on. But seeing the Empress, she just thanked her for personally taking charge of her daughter's education. Then she told Yvette to thank the Dowager Empress immediately as well. The fifth princess couldn't believe it. She honestly never thought things would end up like this. Still, she bowed before Her Majesty, thanked her, and admitted that it was all her fault. Soon, Aris was happy that her sister turned out to be so useful, even though she'd made her sweat a bit beforehand. Siana was also glad she'd asked for her help before leaving, but she wondered if the little one was okay. She confessed that she wanted to ask her something. She was curious why her mother was forced to die. The girl learned from the records that when she'd begged for help, no one had lifted a finger. Her mom was really sick at the time, but for some reason, the doctor refused to come and examine her. Eris didn't dare ask her grandma about it now, knowing she really needed her. And besides, a princess wouldn't ask stuff like that. Siana saw the little one was super bummed and explained that it was okay to cry if she needed to. Siana, even though she hoped Aris's heart wouldn't be broken, knew there was a wound there that couldn't be healed. The girl, still crying, screamed that she hated everyone and wanted them all dead, and the maid figured her plan had flopped. The former subject who seduced the emperor not only got his favor, but also became a member of the imperial family. Back then, she was already pregnant and worried that the emperor's mother would turn her back on her, like everyone else had. After Goldria announced she wanted nothing to do with His Majesty, Rosemary gave birth to a child. It was a beautiful princess, and the palace was decked out with jewels and packed with people. The palace, at that moment, was far from reality, and Rosemary apologized to her daughter that all that was really here was hypocrisy and malice. Now, even though the palace was a battlefield, Siana wanted to use the person who killed the princess's mother. She knew the kid didn't owe her any affection, so she just hugged the girl, feeling super sorry for her. Then Aris hugged the maid herself, asking what the next step was, making it clear she was going to milk this old hag for all she's worth. The maid knew that even though it was twisted and cruel, they'd be boosting the power of the princess and the emperor's mother. After a while, Goldria got worried that her granddaughter hadn't visited since that tea party, so she decided to drop in on her. When she got to the Ruby Palace, the maid reported that someone had tried to poison Princess Eris. The Empress rushed straight to her granddaughter, and Siana added that the little one had received a poisoned dessert as a gift. Luckily, the poison wasn't lethal and wouldn't last long, and the doctor assured them that the girl would recover soon. Still, the princess's body was weak, and there's been no improvement yet, and Siana also confessed that she couldn't reach Her Majesty. The maid started apologizing, but the Empress told her to stop, knowing that she was the one to blame. And then she hugged the little girl, asking her to get well soon and not to worry about a thing. Yvette even heard the news and was stoked that her sister couldn't even get out of bed. She claimed it was because she was talking back and explained that's what happens to people who try to scare her. While she was sharing this with her mom, a servant came in and reported that the emperor's mother had sent her a gift. Goldria asked that it be conveyed that it was for her favorite granddaughter, and that she wanted them to forget what happened together. But the dessert was really a warning that all of Yvette's actions would come back to bite her. The Empress also requested that the princess eat every last bite, since she poured her heart and soul into that dessert. Taking Her Majesty's warning to heart, Yvette and her mother vanished from the history of the imperial family forever. After that, Goldria often visited Eris and took care of her so she would recover quickly. The girl explained that she was already much better and there was no need for the Empress to visit her so often. Her Majesty understood that the girl needed to rest and promised that she would visit her a little later. This tea's kind of bitter, Eris thought, and the maid explained it's 'cause of the medicinal herbs they put in. The princess didn't get why she was acting like she was on death's door, and the maid said poisoning is seriously no joke. Eris was like, it was just a little tummy ache, saying Yvette sent her stuff like this all the time. She also admitted she usually just tossed it, but now she figured she could use it to her advantage. Plus, Eris wanted to use her grandma, and when the time was right, She'd ask why she never helped her mom. The little kid thought she was being a bad person, but she was still glad things were working out for her now. And the maid told her, "You just can't survive in the imperial palace if you're trying to be good." Then, the princess hugged her maid again and begged her to never leave her side. Right then, Siana remembered again asking Rashid what she could do to repay him for his help. He kept saying he didn't need anything, but she kept pushing, and he couldn't think of a single thing to ask for. So, he asked the maid to move into his palace, and Siana froze for a second, totally lost for words. A little later, these twin maids showed up, carrying a bunch of dresses for the princess to try on. Siana checked them out and thought pink would look good on Eris, but blue would look even better. The maid was kind of stumped, seeing that both outfits were gorgeous, and now she couldn't pick which dress was best. But then the princess came out and told those maids to stop bothering her own maid. They agreed, and then started asking Eris herself which dress she liked the most. The girl declared that anything she wore would look amazing on her, and the seamstresses agreed. They were even surprised how sharp she was at such a young age, and Aris confirmed that, yeah, she's pretty smart. After they left, the princess got all angry, muttering that she hates all women except Siana. But the maid explained to her that if they wanted to stay together for a long time, they'd need help from other people. She also said it was in case the princess needed something and she was busy, or just as a backup. Then Siana promised she'd find maids who would love the little one as much as she did. After that, twins named Nini and Nana were sent to the palace, where they'd be working from now on. They swore they'd serve the princess faithfully, and Siana explained they could be trusted since they were Choo-Choo's friends. But the girl didn't like that they looked identical, 'cause she wouldn't be able to tell who was who. Days went by, and the new maids kept gushing over the princess, saying she was beautiful and elegant. They also took good care of Aris, explaining she had to stay healthy and maintain her grace. Siana was happy that everything was going well, and the princess was growing up to be a pretty confident girl. She herself was going to visit the prince, where they prepared a dessert for her, since she was considered an honored guest. The maids were so committed to taking good care of her until His Majesty the Emperor arrived. Meanwhile, the maid looked around and noticed that with its high ceilings, the living room felt more like a garden. What felt even weirder to her was that she, a regular maid, was now being entertained like a VIP aristocrat. Soon, His Highness arrived, showing up with a few of his pets and giving her a sweet smile. Siana told him he looked kinda strange, but Rashid explained he was just taking a walk with his adorable little buddies. He also admitted that's why he was late, and now he was gonna properly welcome his guest. Then the emperor stood up, gave a slight bow, and expressed his gratitude for her coming to his palace. But the girl asked him to get straight to the point and not hesitate to ask her for something in return for his services. Siana explained that the princess was waiting for her, and then the emperor decided to get down to business and explain what he needed. Then Rashid, smiling, added that he really wanted to treat the maid to some dessert and offered her a piece. The girl was surprised that was all he wanted, but let him put the piece in her mouth, and the taste was amazing. The prince explained the dessert was made from top-shelf ingredients, and it's got this amazing fruity aroma. Siana figured the palace had a seriously skilled chef, but Rashid confessed he made the whole thing himself. That made the maid practically choke, and the emperor thought she hated it, but she explained she was just super surprised. Then His Highness admitted he loves to cook, and it's also a way for him to spend time with Siana. Right then, the girl couldn't believe. This was the crown prince. The guy they said was totally heartless. His Majesty also confessed he's a sucker for cute little critters, because they just make you happy looking at 'em. And Siana, watching His Highness at that moment, remembered a story and decided to share it with the prince. She told him about a princess from the Winter Kingdom, who, despite all her grandeur, absolutely hated the cold. This princess couldn't even leave her bedroom with the fireplace blazing until a bird flew to her and took pity on her. The bird wanted to snip off a piece of the sun and give it to the princess, and soon the girl received this gift. That lucky ray of sun finally helped the princess find a way out of the room. The emperor couldn't believe it was true, but the maid swore that it was. Siana also admitted that the story came from her hometown, then asked where the prince knew it from. His Majesty confessed that someone told him when he was a kid, but sadly, he can't remember who. Rashid thought it was the only clue, but he eventually realized he was wrong. On the way home, Siana still couldn't figure out where the prince knew that story from, since she made it up as a kid. Plus, she only told it to one person, and couldn't believe that person was the crown prince back then. After a while, the girl met up with her friend Choo Choo again and thanked her for sending her friends. Siana explained that she saved a whole hour because of it, and also noticed that Choo Choo had become an official maid. She thought she just got lucky, but she understood that she was a pretty capable worker. While the other maids were busy explaining what her triceps were good for, she got invited to Princess Grace's palace. This princess was royalty, so Choo Choo, feeling like a total country bumpkin, was a little thrown. Then she remembered the promotion exams were happening too, and realized Siana didn't even know. Judging by her friend's face, Choo Choo figured she didn't want to take it. But the maid explained it had only been a year since her appointment. Right then, her friend started insisting she didn't know anyone more capable than Siana and was sure she'd ace it. Choo Choo also added that it had broadened her horizons, and passing the exams would give her more authority. Plus, a raise. Siana realized then she and her friend could eat anything they wanted. But what really got the girl pumped was the thought of buying awesome gifts for Princess Eris. Siana even pictured herself quitting being a maid after all that and opening up her own little shop. The girl agreed, even though she had no clue how it'd go. And when she showed up for the exam, she found out her name wasn't on the list. The twins explained to Siana that it was because she was a foreigner, and folks like them didn't get recognized as mid-level maids. Even with her killer skills and tons of experience, she and a few others still got passed over for promotions. This is going to make things tough for them. They're already getting worked to the bone and paid peanuts. When Princess Aris found out they failed the exam because of that crap, she went ballistic and vowed to fight the decision. But Sina begged her not to, saying it was already settled. But the little Spitfire wasn't backing down. The maid kept pushing, adding that Aris shouldn't bring it up with her grandma, 'cause it could seriously backfire on her. The girl started pleading with the princess not to stress so much over her, and said she'd get another shot someday. But soon that chance came knocking, only she bombed the exam because she was too skilled. Still, the examiner had an offer for her, and she was going to put in a good word with the Dowager Empress. If everything goes smooth, then the teacher can bump Siana up to a mid-level maid. The Empress was flawless, especially compared to the Emperor's 4 concubines. Any one of those girls could have been Empress, and now one of them is asking Siana for a favor. The girl knew it was a request she couldn't refuse, and that's when the youngest wife, Angela, came out. This lady looked way younger and more innocent than the maid expected, and she greeted her guest right away. Siana didn't waste any time either, bowing politely and saying it was a pleasure to meet her. Angela learned the maid was 18 and remarked on her excellent manners, even though she hadn't been working long. She also noticed Siana was as modest as she'd been told, admitting she was curious since she worked for Princess Eris. Then she added that Goldria was currently turning a castaway into the perfect princess. After, Angela asked the maid to follow her, requesting that what she was about to see must stay a secret forever. In the room, a little boy was playing with a robot, and the lady explained that this was her son, named Lacey. Then she had the maid start training him, but she wasn't expecting him to be another Aris. After that, Angela asked Siana to think over her offer and give her an answer, and the girl promised she would. She also noticed this kid was different from the others, but there wasn't a single word about Angela's son in the records. She brought it up with His Majesty, hoping he'd heard something about the boy. Siana also added that it was Lacey, the 4th prince, and he'd be 12 this year. Since he lived outside the palace because his father wasn't interested in his kids, there wasn't much info on him. The boy's staying at Marquis Wilhelm's estate for educational purposes, and there were also rumors of some kind of scandal involving that empress's wife. The emperor figured the kid had some issues they were trying to hide, so they wouldn't let him see him. Angela wasn't letting anyone see her son anyway, and no one in the palace had seen him since he was born. Still, the lady intended to officially introduce Lacey to the imperial palace when he turned 12. Rashid realized then that if even the maid was asking questions, something was definitely up with the kid. He admitted he was actually stoked, because he thought she was just there to see him. Siana wanted to ask His Majesty something else, but he repeated that she shouldn't worry about the 4th prince. The maid then stated that she still needed to think about it, because the boy needed her help. Anyway, she got some intel from Rashid and wondered how she could repay him. He explained that Siana had already repaid him, and then added that Princess Aris would be worried. Later, the maid told the little girl that she'd been offered to tutor the prince, but Aris immediately flew into a rage. She declared she'd never allow it and insisted that as her only mistress, she wouldn't let her leave. Siana then explained that she wanted to become a mid-level maid, so she had to take this chance. Lady Angela can break through the wall that she herself can't because of her social status. On top of that, the maid was worried about rumors if she became a third-tier servant, so Eris decided to give her half a day off. The kid admitted she didn't want Siana to do it, but she also didn't want to take away her shot at it either. The maid thanked the princess, knowing she'd be able to do way more stuff later than she could now. That's when the twins came up to Eris, promising they wouldn't let her get bored. But she wasn't feeling that idea. But what calmed the little one down was knowing Siana would still take care of her until she became a mid-level maid. The servant understood that even though she wasn't that great at it, she'd do whatever it took to help the Empress. Angela was stoked she agreed, but she also knew she was probably thrown off by the sudden request. The girl couldn't even believe her mistress was thanking a maid, then asked her to hammer out all the details. Siana explained that the lessons would be 5 hours a day, right up until the boy's birthday. If the results are good during that time, her mistress would bump the maid up to mid-tier. Angela was a little surprised, because she figured the witch would want precious stones, but it was clear she was way greedier than that. The girl explained her greed was directly proportional to the help she'd provide to get the best results. Then the maid asked how long the prince had been like this, and the empress decided to tell her everything from the beginning. As soon as the boy was born, the emperor was ecstatic and praised his wife, saying she'd done a great job. After that, he declared that Angela would be empress, and Marquis Wilhelm would be more powerful than ever. The emperor was also planning to give the kid to a wet nurse, so his wife could relax for a while. A little later, a servant came to her looking worried and explained that His Highness had become kind of off. She explained that he never made eye contact and didn't respond to his name, but Angela demanded they stop calling her son weird. Angela brought this up with the emperor, and he allowed her to rest and recover outside the castle. He also promised that he'd heal their child no matter what, and his wife suggested he come with her. But His Majesty said that would start rumors everywhere, and declared that Prince Lacy needed to get better and wise up. The emperor also made it clear that the boy could only return to the palace when he became the perfect prince. Years later, Angela accidentally saw her father trying to tutor the boy himself and got really scared. He just started yelling at her for daring to come to the estate without permission. Angela thought her father wanted to make Lacy look like an idiot at the first banquet, so he'd never become emperor. The Marquis also told her that no matter what he did, the prince still didn't understand anything and refused to act like a person. The young lady was really worried, but knew she had to find a way out. And a few days ago, she came for Lacy. That day, the moment came when she could take her son, but she wasn't allowed to be called his parent. Her father, the Marquis, promised he'd be back for Lacy's birthday, and she was afraid he'd find out the boy had been here the whole time. Now Angela was hoping for the maid's help, because if her father saw the boy had gotten smarter, he wouldn't blame her. This situation's way worse than Siana thought. She knew the lady had it rough. But the kid's the priority now, and she swore she'd do everything she could. After signing the contract, she knew she had to try even harder, then asked where the prince was. Angela explained that His Highness is super sensitive, but only notices what's right in front of him. The biggest problem, though, is that it's impossible to connect with him. Siana walked up to him, tried to talk, said the weather was nice, and held out her hand. But the boy barely reacted, so the maid told the lady that he wasn't sick, just born this way. She also explained that since he isn't sick, there's no cure for him either. Still, Siana added, there's a way to slightly improve his condition, and even if it's tough, she'll help the lady. Angela was shocked, but agreed to anything just to make her boy better. The lady was worried because she was used to taking care of her son all by herself, without a maid, and had never looked for help before. Still, she had asked Siana to tutor him, but she didn't get why she was only planning to spend a month with the prince. The girl explained that she had spent a long time tutoring a princess, so she'd share all the knowledge that could help. And Angela, even though she's accepting the maid's help, shouldn't give up her kid. A mother is the one who should raise her child. But she wasn't sure she could take care of him properly, and she was also afraid Lacy might not like it. Siana begged the lady not to give up or lose hope. If she didn't, she would succeed and get a great result. Angela promised the maid she'd try, but she still kept worrying, and even deep breaths weren't helping much. Then she went to her son's room to see what he was up to, and he was playing with a toy, like always. The lady noticed the blocks behind him were crooked, and remembering that Lacey hates when things are uneven, she decided to fix them. But the boy gets super mad when someone touches his stuff, and his mother apologized to him. She knew he'd worked his butt off to build this town, but she could tell he was still bored out of his mind. Angela tried to treat him to some goodies, but the kid hated sweets, and he wasn't comfortable with long talks either. Lacey didn't even like listening to music. Loud noises bugged him. And then it hit her. He used to love to draw. Lady thought kids should do what they enjoy, and she hoped this would finally do the trick. She also remembered that when she felt alone and couldn't stop crying, drawing was the only thing that calmed her down. Even though she wasn't exactly skilled, she found it fun, and now she noticed Lacey was getting into it too. Before long, after the boy spent some time with a brush in his hand, he whipped up an amazing painting. Angela was blown away and thought he wasn't just a genius, but a once-in-a-century genius, with a talent most people can only dream of. She still couldn't believe that a kid who'd never been taught anything like this could paint something so incredible. Plus, the boy was totally focused on his work and didn't get distracted by anything for half the day. Even though it wasn't for long, Lacey didn't even glance at his own mom once. Then Siana explained to her that if the boy hated her, he would have just freaked out and run away. But the fact that he didn't means the prince is comfortable being around her. But suddenly, Angela saw her son smash the easel, and she got really scared. But the maid explained that's how he shows he's upset. Siana asked her to really look at the boy, and pointed out he wasn't trying to hurt himself or anyone else. Lacey was just frustrated, and the maid suggested she go over and hug him. Angela agreed, and believed that even if the prince didn't understand her, he could feel her warmth and know she was on his side. Then she hugged the boy to show him her affection, and in those hugs, he understood that she was his mommy. Afterwards, Angela admitted she had no idea that hugging him and comforting him would calm him down so quickly and make him so affectionate. She admitted she really didn't know her son well, and that day the boy fell asleep pretty early because he was exhausted. Angela thanked the maid and let her go, and the maid promised to come back tomorrow. Back at the palace, Siana learned the princess was going on a picnic with the twins. Eris also noticed the maid was tired and promised to bother her tomorrow after work. The girl watched them go. Happy the little girl was pleased, and then she bumped into His Majesty again. Rashid was about to confess he just missed her, but Sol corrected him, saying they came for the tea leaves that arrived a few days ago. He didn't argue with his old friend, and then Siana offered to brew them some tea, and the prince asked a guard to take his pets for a walk. Sol understood what His Majesty was hinting at and didn't argue, and the prince then asked how Lacey's training was going. Rashid admitted he was just curious if the maid could do in 2 weeks what the Marquise couldn't do in 5 years. He explained the kid couldn't maintain eye contact, plus he'd heard he likes to scream like a maniac. Siana explained that His Highness wasn't very stable yet, but he was getting much better and would soon bless everyone with his smile. Rashid still didn't get why she was so sure about this, and the maid explained she'd seen it before. The girl confessed her stepmom's son, her brother, looked a lot like the prince, even though his condition was worse. He didn't understand what people told him, and he wasn't exactly talented, just like the prince. They even considered sending him to a monastery at first, but then his condition improved, and it was all thanks to his mom's deep and genuine love. She believed that by her side, her son would thrive and be way happier than anywhere else. Now Siana's brother is gone. She admitted he was also cruel and tormented her and the other maids. That's why the girl decided to tell His Majesty everything, and she also confessed she doesn't feel anything about her family members' deaths. Either way, what's more important to her right now is that the prince's condition is improving every day. Siana also believed that at this rate, he'll be able to carry himself with dignity by his birthday. A little later, Angela explained to her son that he should repeat after her, and if he succeeded, she'd kiss him and give him new paints. Soon, the kid was able to repeat that he was the 4th prince, Lacey, and thanked everyone for coming to his birthday. Angela was super happy her son nailed it, and gushed about how smart he was. Sienna saw the results and admitted the lady had done an amazing job, and Lacey worked his butt off too. Then the maid explained to Angela that this was it for now, but Angela protested, saying the party was still 3 days away. Sienna also explained that Prince Lacey is who he is, and that's the real him, but he's still too young and sensitive, and his mom's too soft to stand up to all those people, so Sienna decided to offer her a suggestion. The girl explained that the banquet celebrating the prince's birthday should be postponed for another year. But Angela was worried that if she didn't present Lacey this time, he could lose his title. Just then, a panicked maid ran into the room and announced that Marquis Wilhelm had arrived. The lady freaked out, and Wilhelm was already trying to bust in, yelling at them not to dare hold him back. The maids told him he needed permission to enter the Empress's palace, but he just threw them out. Without even a hello, he walked up to his daughter and announced he had important business, then asked where the prince was. Angela immediately started explaining that Lacey was lonely back at the estate, so she couldn't leave him alone. Then she brought him to the imperial palace, where she started tutoring him with the help of a talented maid. They managed to improve his condition, and Angela hoped her father would appreciate it, but he also suggested postponing the banquet. He even added that if this didn't work, they could just announce the prince had died in an accident. Still, he couldn't do that to his own grandson, and he was glad he didn't have to worry about that problem anymore. Then the Marquis told his daughter not to worry, because he knew how to help Lacey now. He explained that with magic, someone could control the prince throughout the banquet, and they could fool the guest. The Marquis also explained that they just didn't have any other choice, since it was the only way to meet expectations. He assured his daughter it was just temporary for the banquet, then he'd get back to training the kid himself. Now the Marquis was sure he could protect not only the family's honor, but Lacey's honor too. Angela begged her father not to, saying it wasn't necessary anymore, and she didn't want to do something so awful to her son. But he yelled that she needed to face reality, saying he didn't want to resort to this either. Then, entering the room, the Marquis saw the boy peacefully drawing some picture, but Grandpa was determined to take him, and he didn't even stop when his daughter fell to his feet, begging. Angela was terrified something bad might happen to her son, but her father just shoved her aside. Then he grabbed the little prince, who, scared out of his mind, started calling for his mommy to protect him. But the lady couldn't disobey her father. She'd always played the obedient daughter, a role she couldn't even remember now. She had to be the perfect lady to survive, and when they laced her corset, she wasn't allowed to make a sound. Then it hit her. She remembered how stoked her dad was that they'd snagged her the perfect match, Emperor's fourth wife. But the truth was, Angela was just straight up terrified and silently praying someone would save her ass. Now she knew she had to protect at least her kid, and she instantly lunged at her father, demanding he let go of her son. She told him he wasn't taking him, period, and declared from now on, the prince stays with her, end of discussion. The Marquis thought his daughter was acting like a damn empress, and realized he'd been way too nice to her. Then he explained that even with a crown on her head, she was still his daughter, and that hadn't changed. The Marquis was pissed that when he was trying to protect his family, Angela decided to start a rebellion. He slapped her across the face, but then soldiers swarmed him, yelling that he dared lay a hand on a member of the royal family. Sienna rushed to Angela to calm her down, explaining that these guys were just trying to kick her dad out. And she decided right then and there to order the soldiers to throw that guy in the slammer, and do it now. Even locked up in the dungeon, the Marquis was screaming at the guards, claiming his daughter was the empress of this whole country. He also yelled that those soldiers, his daughter, and that nasty little maid would pay for this, for bringing such shame on him. That's when he noticed that very maid approaching him, but he told her not to even think about begging for forgiveness. But Sienna explained that she wasn't there to ask for forgiveness, but to deliver a message from her lady. The girl remembered explaining to Angela that she'd already prepped the guards, having noticed the Marquis was in a foul mood. Then she'd come running the second she heard that guy threatening his own daughter and the prince. And since the maid witnessed the whole thing, the Marquis was caught red-handed and thrown in the slammer. Angela then declared she wouldn't let her father manipulate her or her son anymore. Then she asked her to tell him that he'd better not show his face at the imperial palace again unless she gave him permission. Angela also wanted him to know that she'd be raising Lacey from now on, but the Marquis just got pissed that his daughter sent a servant to tell him all this. He started demanding they bring Angela here, But Siana pointed out she's not just the empress, she's the prince's mother. Her insulting her was basically a slap in the face to the emperor, so the marquise is now considered a traitor. And if he doesn't want to carry that traitor label, he better take Her Majesty's advice, 'cause it might be